There were no ships with us at all. We just sailed alone.
But the New Amsterdam was very fast and the German U-boats couldn't keep up with it. So she escaped, and being painted gray, she could slip into fog or disappear on the horizon.
By the time that the war was over, New Amsterdam had steamed over 500,000 miles, carrying almost 400,000 troops, including tens of thousands for the invasion of Normandy. Only the Queen Mary and the Queen Elizabeth carried more troops than our New Amsterdam, and they were twice her size. Now, after the war, it took 13 months to return her to her former beauty, and it cost nearly as much as it did to build her in the first place. But it was worth it, because when she finally returned home to Rotterdam, she did so to what can only be described as a hero's welcome.
In 1946, 1 year after the war ended, it returned to Holland, and it steamed into Rotterdam, still scarred in rust and the gray paint, and to the Dutch people, it was the symbol of liberation more than anything else, and they painted the Holland America stacks in the yellow, green, and white, and the people dubbed it the darling of the Dutch. We are truly free. The New Amsterdam has come back to Holland.
And the ship was welcomed like you would welcome a queen or a president. The new waterway in the river, there were a lot of ships really with flags and people alongside the quays really welcoming the ship back. And in a way you can say that for at least the people from Rotterdam, war really ended at the moment that the New Amsterdam was back in this city.
Of our 20-ship fleet, only 10 survived the war. One of them, Westerdam, was sunk 3 times. 3 times. And yet she was the first ship to return to New York Harbor after the war was over.
In 1946, when the Westerdam was the first liner to come back after the war, she sailed right on this path on the Hudson River. It probably was early morning at 7 a.m. Maybe a tugboat or two or a fireboat escorted her up the river. She was dressed in flags, and she slowly made her progress up to Hoboken, which would be a little further north than where I am right now in Jersey City. But she'd make a graceful sight. She looked pretty against the New York City skyline. You know, the new ship, morning, wonderful, a beginning.
It was the end of the war and the start of a whole new era. Okay, so something that we haven't talked about yet is this thing that we do with the names of our ships. First of all, our passenger ships all end with the word damn. And when we had cargo ships, they all ended with this, dike, as in the thing that keeps water from flooding a city. Now, I'm telling you this for a reason. The names of our ships are important to us. So important, in fact, that we keep repeating them over and over again. There's been 3 Volendams, 3 Rhindams. We've had 4 New Amsterdams and 5.5 Stuttendams. One's technically New Stuttendam, but it still counts. Now, why do we do all of this? Well, remember what I said in the beginning? How stories, they help us learn from our past, become stronger from our failures, and wiser from our victories? Well, how do you do all of that? You do it by remembering and by honoring the past that continues to shape our future. And it matters, it really matters. On New Stuttendam's maiden voyage, we met a man who you actually heard from earlier. He escaped the Nazis in 1939 on Stuttendam 3. He chose to cruise on New Stuttendam all of those years later so that he could reconnect to his past. Now in this way, our ships become time machines. They're receptacles of your memories and of your family's memories, and they echo with the voyages of the past. Now, of course, there's been one name that we've returned to more than any other, Rotterdam. Now, there's been a lot of Rotterdams in our history. We had 4 ships named Rotterdam before our company was even 40 years old. But of all of the Rotterdams, there is none more important to our story and none that really better illustrates our journey than Rotterdam 5, the grand dam of the spotless fleet. Now here she is in September of 1958. 50,000 people lined the banks of the Rotterdam shipyard to watch Queen Juliana christen her. And she was stunning. The first ship to really and truly look like a modern cruise ship.
The Rotterdam was so unique, she didn't have a smokestack. She had twin uptakes on the outside, and her decor was very, very modern. Ships were becoming more like floating hotels, gymnasiums, swimming pools, shopping arcades, movie theaters. They were becoming really hotels at sea or resorts at sea. And the Rotterdam was one of the great statements of, well, extraordinary maritime design for her period.
And when we talk about extraordinary design, we have to talk about one of Holland America's greatest contributions to cruising, the Lido Cafe. You could step in from the pool, grab a bite to eat, and go back to your sunbathing. So, you're welcome. And she was the future, but her timing was terrible. A month after she launched, the world changed again.
In October 1958, the first jet flies from London to New York. The shipping industry announces flying is a fad, it will pass. It's a mere ripple in the road of travel. In 6 months, the airlines had 2/3 of all the business. In 5 years, 98%.
That plane took only 6 hours to cross the ocean. 6 hours. A trip that ocean liners made in 6 days. Frankly, that should have been the end of our story, if not for Rotterdam 5. Because just like we'd innovated in the past, every detail of Rotterdam 5 seemed to predict the end of the transatlantic business and the beginning of something new. Take, for example, the staircase. There was a movable partition that could be closed to create a first class and a tourist class for transatlantic crossings. Or we could open it and create a single class of ship, which was perfect for cruising. Even the first and the tourist class dining rooms were identical. The first class dining room was just a little bit closer to the kitchen though, so the food was a little bit warmer. But Rotterdam 5 was this huge success. She cruised the West Indies and the Caribbean, South America and Europe, and in 1961 she began a yearly tradition of circumnavigating the world.
Some people would take the world cruise every year. It was like a floating clubhouse. They'd bring their own favorite foods, their own furniture, so they'd feel at home. It was magic. There were all sorts of stories. The lady who took 300 dresses for 95 days. What about the lady who took 2 suites? One was for her harp. What about the lady who took a second suite for her stuffed animal collection, which she traveled with around the world?
The best one that Bill told us about, though, was the person who brought their plastic surgeon. Can you imagine they've left for a 95-day cruise and come back looking 20 years younger? Talk about a time machine.
Wow.
The Rotterdam of 1959, the Rotterdam 5, sailed for over 30 years for Holland America Line. She's also one of those ships that was beloved, a certain kind of chemistry that you don't build in the shipyard, but it's in the woodwork and the paneling. It just engulfs people, so passengers and crew love that ship.
And if you actually do want an amazing time machine experience, Rotterdam 5 is now a floating hotel in Rotterdam Harbour. You can go on board and you can walk her halls. You can see this beautiful design, and you can even reach out and touch the steam engines. You can see the saltwater pool and just simply explore the past right in front of you. It's honestly breathtaking. But you know what one of my favorite things about Rotterdam 5 is every time that we call into Rotterdam, as we pass by that grand old ship, we blow our horn and salute. Because Rotterdam 5, it's more than just a beloved ship, because she was the thing that allowed us to go from being a fleet of ocean liners that occasionally cruised to making cruising the entirety of our business. But by the time the 60s rolled around, we'd entered this new battleground in the cruising industry. As other fleets were making the same adjustments that we were making, we found ourselves, once again, in competition for passengers. We had to find a unique advantage, and we had to do it fast. Because the 60s may have been swinging, but the 70s brought about oil embargoes and financial crises, and suddenly we had major choices to make. Now, the first thing that we did was we shuttered our cargo operations. Now, we've had about 80 cargo ships in our history, but from that moment on, we'd never have another one. And things were starting to look bleak. Now, I'm going to let Case explain. Back in the 70s, Case was on one of our last few passenger ships in operation, Prinsendam.
There were only 3 or 4 passenger ships left, and that was not enough to sustain the company and pay for the overhead. So it was felt that we need to offer new and exciting adventures. In the mid-1970s, the company was associated with West Tours, a very successful tour company here in Alaska. So they decided, we're going to bring that Prinsendam to Alaska.
That's right. While the rest of the world was focusing on cruising the warm waters of the Caribbean, we took one ship, one of our last ships, and sent it thousands of miles in the wrong direction.
I was on the Prinsendam. That was the very first ship slotted to go to Alaska. Alaska was different, very, very, very different than it is now. If you walked in Juneau, there were no jewelry shops like you find everywhere in the Caribbean. There were no tour buses. They used school buses. That was all what was available in those days. Sitka had 3 taxis, then it was it.
Also, there was actually another problem. Prinsendam was in Asia and had had to get across the Pacific to start her first Alaskan cruise, which was actually pretty tricky in the days before GPS and computer-guided navigation.
This was supposed to be a 10-day North Pacific crossing, and this was in April. And we left Yokohama, and it was dense fog. Couldn't see anything for days. So here we go, basically the old-fashioned way, dead reckoning. You estimate how fast the ship is going, you know your course, and you plot in the chart, every day where you are. So I'm on the bridge, and I look on the radar, and I look outside, and I look on the radar again, and I see land. So it's supposed to be land for at least another day, to our estimate. So I called the captain, and I said, "Captain, oi, land in sight." He said, "What the hell are you talking about? It's not 1650, yeah, it's 1975. He said, "Come on the bridge, I see land." And he saw the snow-capped mountains, on Vancouver Island.
They had arrived a full 24 hours early. Remember what I said earlier about never being behind the curve again? Well, it's kind of amazing that we were that far ahead of our schedule for our first Alaskan cruise, because Holland America Line was way ahead of everyone else when it came to cruising in Alaska. And it paid off. Thousands of people flocked to explore this new destination. So many, in fact, that we actually had to start bringing ships from New York over to the West Coast.
The ships needed to move from New York to Vancouver, and that's a long way. So we needed to come up with a cruise to do that make it attractive for people to say, "Hey, I've never been with a ship through the Panama Canal. Hey, there are interesting ports down in the Caribbean that we normally don't go to." The company always found a way to persevere. It's hard to say you did well at times are difficult, but it's not how you go in, but how you come out.
And in just a few years, we've become this Alaskan powerhouse. We bought a train, a resort, and we helped transform Alaska into what it is today, this top tourist destination in the world. And it's amazing, that one idea, Cruise Alaska, it changed everything for us. And we like to think of it kind of as this poetic justice, because the jet plane kind of almost ruined us, but just by taking risks and by stepping out of what was comfortable, we were able to survive. And don't get me wrong, jet planes are amazing. They can obviously take us all over the world, but jet planes can't always show us this up close. Now, Alaska was so successful that despite the economic disaster of the 70s, we were planning to expand our fleet by 2 more ships. But then something happened. In the late 80s, Alaska put us on the radar of a small company down in Florida, perhaps you might have heard of them, Carnival. Now, our partnership with Carnival just immediately paid off, because instead of 2 ships, we took delivery of 12 ships in 12 years. Each one a purpose-built cruise ship each one built in the Fincantieri shipyard in Italy, and each one a symbol of how far we'd come. Now, each ship was a symbol of a commitment to go further, deeper, and to connect people with new experiences and to make new memories. Now, it's a big idea, and it's a lot of responsibility. It's also a responsibility that we do take very seriously. In 2020, we encountered this global tragedy that affected lives and communities everywhere, and it totally disrupted the cruise industry. In all of our history, the COVID-19 pandemic was one of the biggest challenges, of course, we've ever faced. As the world ground to a halt and governments raced to respond, we knew what we had to do. First, we had to get our guests home. And to be honest, it was hard. It was one of the hardest things that we've ever had to go through. But as hard as it was, we were committed to doing everything and anything it was going to take. Now, it took every single one of us, but we got it done. But our work wasn't over yet. After we got our guests home, our focus turned to our team members. Thousands of people who come from just all corners of the globe, and Holland America Line joined the largest peacetime repatriation effort in the history of the world. Now, with planes grounded and borders closed, it took unprecedented cooperation and nearly 4 months. But finally, we got everyone home. And to be honest, when you need to move thousands of people thousands of miles, and air travel is really no sure thing, it's a really good time to have your own navy. This photograph was taken on June 4 of 2020. A couple of our ships, along with dozens of others, anchored in Manila Bay. Now, shortly before this photo was taken, I was on Westerdam, the only ship we had in Asia at the start of the pandemic, and our first ship to come out of service. Eventually, we had ships all over the world where we waited, we mourned, and we hoped for a light. And now, here we are together, all back at sea, and perhaps most importantly, once again, hopeful for the future. Remember what Kay said? It's not always about how you go in, but how you come out. So how do we come out of this? Well, we've always believed in this power of travel, that it binds us together. It helps us dream, and it helps us forge these new memories. And now, more than ever, we're embracing our past as we move forward with a new beginning.
Good.
And what better way to begin as we often have before, with a new 7th Rotterdam. Now, our first ship to launch after the pandemic, named like so many before her after our home, is this reminder of resilience and an expression of hope that while there are times of hardship, there are also many journeys that lie ahead. And to help her in this mission, the newest Rotterdam, like every Holland America Line ship before her, will have someone very, very special looking over her. For thousands of years, ship captains from nearly every single world culture have looked to the heavens to protect their ships against the unknown. As recently as just a few hundred years ago, women were carved into the bows of ships to give captains better sight. Now, we do something that's a little bit different. We have godmothers. Now, our tradition started with our very first ship, Rotterdam. She was dedicated by the captain's daughter. Our second ship, Mazdam, was similarly godmothered by the captain's daughter. And since that day, every single ship we've had has had a godmother looking over her. We've had actresses and television personalities. We've had athletes. We've even had the Olsen twins. We've had 11 members of the Dutch royal family, 4 princesses, 4 queens. Queen Wilhelmina dedicated New Amsterdam too. Now, by the way, at one time, Queen Wilhelmina was the richest woman in the world. She was the very first female billionaire. Now, our royal family, they may not be the flashiest. They are one of the wealthiest, but most importantly, they are one of the most beloved. When Queen Juliana christened Rotterdam 5, 50,000 people showed up to watch.
Wow.
Her daughter, Queen Beatrix, was the godmother of 2 ships, Statendam 4 and the one and only Eurodam. And our current queen, Queen Maxima, not only watches over New Amsterdam, but also over Koningsdam, a ship named for her husband, King Willem-Alexander, the first male monarch of the Netherlands in over a century. Recently, we welcomed Oprah Winfrey into our family of godmothers when she dedicated New Stutton Dam in February 2019, sending her off on the trip of a lifetime. And Rotterdam 7, our newest flagship, is blessed by Princess Margaret, who now holds the record for the most Holland America Line ships christened and proudly continues this rich tradition. Now, our story has lasted nearly 150 years, and it's been extraordinary. We've survived 2 world wars, the death of the ocean liner, a Great Depression, and multiple economic crises. We've circled the globe, carried generations of passengers, and seen the birth of countless eras. So, what do you learn from all of this, besides a few fun historical tidbits? Well, there's an old saying: the pessimist complains about the wind, the optimist expects it to change, and the realist adjusts the sails. Now, I know it's a little corny to do a sailing metaphor on a ship, but this one, it kind of just works because it perfectly sums up the journey of Holland America Line. With every change, every difficulty, and every error, we observed, we learned, and we made the adjustments to put us where we are today, almost 150 years later. Stronger, wiser, and ready to continue taking people to new worlds. Now, I want to leave you this afternoon with some words from Bill Miller, because I think he puts this whole thing pretty well.
It's not about rivets or steel or carpets or artwork. It's the magic that somehow that a ship has when it comes in the beginning that just extends to everybody, and they just love it. They've been a wonderful family. They've been my friends. I've watched them come and they go, their life stories. It's like a great big maritime soap opera with all these actresses playing these parts. And when I put my little head on the pillow at night, I think the ships are still here, thank God. It's wonderful.
And so, on behalf of the 15,000 current team members of Holland America Line, and to all of those who have come before, we want to thank you for coming along today, and also thank you for being part of our journey. At this moment, I'd kindly like to invite the master of the vessel, Captain Arne Schmidt, to come and say a few words.
All right.
Thank you, Jeremy, for this wonderful presentation, and quite some history we've had. And like Jeremy said, there's quite a few crises that we went through, and the last one was pretty much the biggest one. But I'm very happy that we are all here together with a full house and a full ship. It's less than a year ago we were still in Corfu and in Greece with very nice weather after we started our adventure in the Netherlands at anchor for several months. And then when winter came, they said, let's move you guys. And I said, that's a really good idea. And then we moved to the southern UK, which was a really bad idea. I stayed there for a while, and I went to Greece, which was much nicer. But early this year we were still there, and then went to dry dock. We restarted in May, went from 65 through to 565, and had to get this whole ship back alive, get people on board, restart. And now we've finally finished our first grand voyage together, the first one.
Woo! Right!
So a very nice thing, and I'm very happy to be able to steer us all the way around Africa and be part of this grand voyage. I experienced it as an adventure. I hope you enjoyed it very much, and I hope you have some really good memories of this voyage.
Thank you.
You learned a lot of things, seen things, nice like elephants and lemurs, and mummified corpses, etc., etc. I very much enjoyed it. I didn't go ashore as much as you did, but I went also a few times. My favorite one was in Cape Town, where I also learned something. I learned what was an Uber taxi and how to order one. Florian told me all about it, and I said, this is great, but we ended up somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Trying to find an Uber when you want to leave was not so easy, so we ended up in a bus. They said, we'll bring you to the top, but we had no idea where we were going. I said, Florian, I think we'll end up in Zimbabwe or somewhere. You know. I'm really nervous, but Florian said, don't worry, there's a lot of our passengers in this bus, and they always find the ship. thanks for helping me find my own ship. We were a few hours late, but we were only we had an overnight. That was good. I don't think they would have left without us anyway. I very much enjoyed it, and I hope you did too. But as with all good things, there's an end to it. We're almost at the end already of this 71 days. I thought it would never end when I started. I thought, oh, we're going to do this, or we're all going to have COVID, and but we did very well. And we followed our procedures, and it was all great. And thanks to you, thank you very much. And now I think it's time to say farewell. But I feel a bit alone. Is there a few crew members maybe who can help me out with that? I think that's
All right, come on.
I'll make it.
There you go. Emotional.
I feel like dancing, but I will restrain myself.
All right. Oh, that was good. Trời ơi, quá đông.
This is not going to fit.